This is our website, parliamentarycandidates.org, if you'd like to visit. And I think that's now 21 days until the general election. Today, very briefly, I want to talk about 4 things. I want to talk about percent BME candidates, percentage women candidates, age distribution of the candidates, and a bit about selection in retirement seats. I also want to say a little bit about the project in terms of how we get our data. There is no single data source on candidates or MPs, and that's partly what this project is trying to remedy. So we pull our data from a variety of sources: newspapers, blogs, Twitter feeds, Facebook, DODs, anywhere where we can find information. Because neither do the parties collect this information systematically and make it available, nor does an organization like the Electoral Commission. So in one vein, we're reliant on what candidates provide. And if they don't tell you how old they are, or where they went to school, or if they're married or have children, then we can't get that information. So there is some degree of missingness in our data, which I'll flag up. Moving to percentage of BME candidates selected by the party. There are 2 bars here. The top bar is new candidates, and this excludes those who were MPs in 2010, or in the last cohort. So these are the candidates that parties have selected. And as you can see from the top line brown there, the overall percentage of new candidates selected that have BME profile is 8%, and that is true for all candidates. Now this is a significant increase in terms of the number of candidates selected. You'll recall in 2010 there were about 4.2% BME MPs that were elected in 2010. So we're starting from a higher base. And I think there's good reason to think that we will see more BME MPs elected. You will see that the Conservatives are far ahead in terms of the percentage of BME candidates, new candidates that have been selected. And they've been making a very conscious effort in this regard. So amongst their new candidates, it's 14%. Candidates overall, including their old MPs, 10%, followed by Labour and Lib Dems at 8% overall. Interestingly, UKIP has 6% BME candidates, which is more than SNP, Plaid, and the Green Party. Now, when we look at where candidates have put, where parties have put their candidates, we know from academic research that whilst parties do tend to select in terms of increasing their diversity, they don't always place those candidates in winnable seats. They tend to be out in places there's no chance of winning. We wanted to look to see how well the parties have done in terms of their winnable seats. And the way we calculated this is as following. We took those constituencies that had a less than 10% vote difference between the first and second place parties in 2010, and where that party came second. So it's a sense of, is that a target for the party? Can they win that particular seat? Is it a seat that they're competitive for? And when you look at where parties are trying to win seats, where they might be investing their resources, you see that 8% overall candidates have been put in target seat. So 8% overall selected and 8% in their target seats. But you'll see that the numbers fall back here for the Conservatives. Although they have 10% overall, 5% are in their target seats. And the numbers increase here for Labour and for Lib Dems. So they have more BME candidates in their target seats. Right, looking at gender. You will see that the Greens are ahead here both in terms of all candidates and new candidates selected, followed by Labour and the SNP. Tories are at just under a third for their new candidates that they've selected, but 26 when you include MPs from 2010. And the real outlier here is UKIP, who have 13% women candidates selected. Now, again, what happens when you look at where women are placed? So what happens when we look at those marginal seats? Here's where we see a stark difference. So Labour has placed 53% women candidates in their marginal seats, in those seats where they are likely to win. All the parties are doing relatively well. You see the overall figure here is just under a third. So relative to women candidates selected and where they have been placed, we're looking at kind of relative parity there in terms of where they're placed. And you can see the Greens and the Debs on 35%. And UKIP, again, far behind. Now, for both BME candidates and gender, we have about 95 to 98% of all information on candidates. So we think these estimates are pretty accurate and wouldn't shift at all. And even one or two additional candidates with these profiles wouldn't move the percentages. Where we have less data is on something like age. And this is simply because candidates will report their age if they think it's an asset or if they're not that fussed by it. So it's somewhat ironic that you think something that's very basic about how old is the candidate standing in your constituency is actually enormously difficult to find. Now, this is a quite busy visual, but it's broken down again by all candidates and new candidates. I think the thing to just point out here is to look at the age profile of UKIP candidates. 34 and 33 is 67%. So 67% of UKIP candidates are 50 or older. So a slightly older profile for their candidates, which reflects their demographic in terms of their support. And you can see that the Greens have a relatively younger profile, actually as do the Conservatives. They've got 13% new candidates who are in the 18 to 29 group. Again, looking at this by the target seats, I think the interesting thing is, just as I pointed out, UKIP up here has a relatively older profile of candidates, Greens are relatively young, but notice the kind of near equal distribution across the age range. So we're looking at a set of candidates that run the gamut across the age profile. But again, do keep in mind there's quite a lot of missing data here. Yes, 1 minute, perfect. Just to think about retirement seats. So our data show that there are 87 MPs who stood down in 2010. Our list of MPs is the regular traditional retirements. They're retiring from politics and moving on. So it doesn't capture people like Anne McIntosh, who were deselected by the party, though we list that separately in another table on our website. Where we can see some really significant gains, I think, in percent of BME candidates, is here. The Conservatives have selected 7 BME candidates in constituencies that are extremely safe. You're looking at 43, 32% here. So it's very likely that we're going to see a significant increase in the number of BME Tory MPs elected. And then finally, in terms of female candidates selected in the party's retirement seats, again, the parties have done well here in terms of putting these candidates in what, for the most part, relatively safe seats. Liberal Democrats, 6 of 10, Labour, 64%, Conservatives just under 4 and 10. That's it.
Thank you very much.